I showed up at my daughter's house feigning despair. I told her I'd been evicted and was now broke. She let me in, but spent the entire evening sighing about how hard it was for her. Before bed, she handed me a notebook and pen. "Mom, please write down everything you eat. We'll count it later." That same evening, my granddaughter secretly slipped her last $20 in travel money into my pocket. She didn't know I had a check for $90 million in my purse. My daughter will soon realize that the bill I'm sending her for her hospitality is one she won't be able to pay for the rest of her life. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. Let me take you back to how this whole thing started. It wasn't with a lottery ticket, not really. It started with a leaky faucet in my rented duplex, a place I'd called home for 12 years after my husband, Richard, passed away. The landlord, a sour-faced man named Mr. Peterson, had been promising to fix it for 6 months. I'd called, I'd texted, I'd left polite little notes. Nothing. Finally, the drip, drip, drip turned into a steady trickle, and then one morning I woke up to what sounded like Niagara Falls in my kitchen. The cheap linoleum was peeling up in a yellowed, waterlogged grin. That was the day the eviction notice appeared, tacked to my door with a rusty thumbtack. The reason? Destruction of property? Can you believe the nerve? So there I was, 68 years old, with a fixed income from Richard's modest pension and my Social Security, facing homelessness. At least, that's the story I decided to tell. The truth? The day before the Great Flood, I'd stopped at a little convenience store for a carton of milk and a bit of chocolate. The lottery machine was by the counter, whirring and beeping. On a whim, an impulse I still can't explain, I bought a quick pick ticket. I tucked it into the side pocket of my purse and promptly forgot about it. It wasn't until 3 days after Mr. Peterson had taped that eviction notice to my door that I remembered it. I was sitting at a local diner, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee and trying to figure out my next move, when I saw the news story on their little TV. Local resident wins $90 million Powerball jackpot, the Chiron screamed. I nearly choked on my coffee. With a trembling hand, I pulled the crumpled ticket from my purse. My glasses slid down my nose as I tried to focus on the numbers. One by one, they matched. My heart didn't just flutter. It felt like it did a full-on salsa dance in my chest. I sat there in that sticky vinyl booth for a full hour, just staring at the ticket. $90 million. After taxes, it would still be an astronomical sum. A number with so many zeros, it looked like a typo. My first thought wasn't of new cars or fancy houses. It was Richard. Oh, how he would have loved this. We always talked about what we'd do. Pay off the house, travel, help the kids. He would have wanted me to be sensible. He was the sensible one. And that's when the idea, cold and sharp as an icicle, pierced through my shock. Help the kids. Well, that was a lovely thought, wasn't it? My son David lived in Oregon with his lovely wife and 2 boys. He was a good man, always checking in, always ending his calls with, "Love you, Mom." But then there was my daughter Brenda, my high-flying, self-made Brenda, who hadn't called me in 6 weeks. The one who lived 20 minutes away in a 5-bedroom house with a pool and a 3-car garage, who always seemed to find a reason why it was a bad time for me to visit. "Oh, Mom, the house is a wreck. Mark and I are just so slammed with work. The girls have their soccer tournaments all weekend." The excuses were endless and always delivered with that slightly patronizing tone she'd perfected. Brenda, who'd borrowed $5,000 from me 5 years ago, my emergency savings, for a can't-miss investment opportunity that never seemed to pay out. When I'd meekly asked about it last year, she'd sighed dramatically. "Mom, you know how the market is. It's tied up right now. You have to be patient."
patience from the woman who tapped her foot if her barista took more than 90 seconds to steam her almond milk. So this wasn't just about the leaky faucet anymore. It was about everything. The missed birthdays, the holidays I spent alone because she was taking her family to Vail or Cabo. The way she looked at my sensible Sears outfits with a faint curl of her lip. The unspoken message was always clear. I was an inconvenience, a slightly embarrassing relic from a past she was desperate to escape. So, sitting in that diner, with a check in my purse that could buy the whole block, I decided to conduct a little experiment. I was broke. I was desperate. I was about to lose my home. Which of my children would be there for me? I knew David would, in a heartbeat. He'd offer to fly me out, move heaven and earth to get me settled. But Brenda? This was a test for her, a final exam. And I had a sinking feeling she was about to fail spectacularly.
He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Oh, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's for Mr. Peterson. For Brenda? Well, her day of reckoning was just dawning. I practiced my story in the car, making sure I had the details right. I even worked up a few believable tears. I parked my 10-year-old Toyota, a car Brenda referred to as that old thing, 3 blocks away, out of sight. I wanted to arrive on foot, looking properly pathetic. I walked up the winding cobblestone path to her gleaming front door, the kind of door that cost more than my monthly rent, and rang the bell. Brenda opened it, dressed in a sleek black athleisure outfit that probably cost $400. She was on her phone, one perfectly manicured finger held up to silence me before she even said hello. No, Tara. The caterer has to use organic kale. I don't care what it costs. It's for the fundraiser. Just handle it. She snapped the phone shut and finally focused on me. Her perfectly arched eyebrows furrowed. Mom, what are you doing here? You look awful. That was my daughter. No, are you okay? Just a blunt appraisal of my appearance. It was perfect. I let the tears I'd been practicing well up. Brenda, honey, I choked out, leaning against the doorframe for dramatic effect. Something terrible has happened. I laid it on thick. The slumlord, the flood, the eviction. I told her I had nowhere to go, that the shelter was full, that all my savings were gone, which was technically true, just not for the reasons she imagined. I watched her face, searching for a flicker of genuine concern. What I saw was a rapid calculation. Her eyes darted from my worn-out coat to my scuffed shoes, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. This was an inconvenience. A big, messy, 68-year-old inconvenience. Oh, Mom, that's terrible, she said, the words sounding hollow in her cavernous foyer. Well, come in. Don't just stand there on the porch. The neighbors will see. Yes, the neighbors. Mustn't upset the HOA. She led me into her spotless grayish and white living room. It looked like a page from a magazine, sterile and untouched. I wasn't even sure I should sit on the pristine white sofa. She gestured vaguely. Sit, I guess. Let me get you a water. As she left the room, her eldest daughter, 17-year-old Maya, came down the stairs. Maya was the light of my life. A kind, artistic soul trapped in a family that valued stock portfolios over sketches. She stopped dead when she saw me. Grandma, what's wrong? Before I could answer, Brenda returned with a bottle of Fiji water, God forbid I drink from the tap, and shooed her away. Maya, honey, Grandma and I are having a grown-up conversation. Go do your homework. Maya gave me a worried look over her shoulder and mouthed, Are you okay? I gave her a tiny, sad little shake of my head, playing my part. She bit her lip and disappeared upstairs. Brenda sat opposite me, perched on a chair that looked more like a sculpture than a place to sit. So, she began, her tone all business. What's the plan?
Obviously, you can't stay here long term. This isn't a retirement home. The sheer coldness of it stole my breath for a second. I don't have a plan, honey. I stammered, twisting the strap of my old purse in my lap, the purse containing the winning ticket. The irony was so thick I could have sliced it with a knife. I was hoping I could just stay here for a little bit, just until I get on my feet. A long, suffering sigh escaped her lips. Mom, you don't understand. Mark is up for partner at the firm. We're doing a lot of entertaining. Having you here, well, it's not ideal. Translation, you're an embarrassment and you'll mess up my aesthetic. I won't be any trouble, I promised. I can cook, I can clean, I can help with the girls. We have a housekeeper and a chef, she cut in sharply. Look, you can stay in the guest room for now, but we need to find you a place. One of those senior apartment buildings or something. We'll look into it tomorrow. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Oh, sorry, that's Mr. Peterson's story again. My brain is getting ahead of my mouth. Brenda, my dear daughter, thought she had me cornered. She thought I was a helpless old woman. She had no idea she wasn't cornering me. She was walking straight into the corner I was building for her. The evening was excruciating. Her husband, Mark, came home. He was a man who always looked like he was smelling something bad. He gave me a brisk, dismissive handshake, his eyes already flicking back to his phone. Brenda filled me in. Tough break, he said, without an ounce of sympathy, before heading to his office to take a call. Dinner was a quinoa and kale salad that tasted like freshly mown grass, served on plates that definitely were not for everyday use. Brenda and Mark talked over and around me, discussing their upcoming trip to Aspen and complaining about the cost of their youngest daughter's private tennis lessons. I ate silently, the helpless, broke mother, a ghost at their designer table.
The crowning moment, the cherry on top of this whole insulting Sunday, came after dinner. As Brenda was showing me to the guest room, a room nicer than my entire old apartment, she paused at the door. "Mom," she said, her voice now laced with a false, saccharine sweetness. "I know this is awkward, but things are a little tight right now with all the renovations we have planned." Tight. In a house that screamed new money. "We're happy to help you out, of course," she continued, "but we'll need to be mindful of expenses. I got this for you." She handed me a small, spiral-bound notebook and a pen. It was the kind you'd buy in a multi-pack from the dollar store. I looked at it, then at her. "What's this for?" Her smile was brittle. "I need you to keep a log. Just a little diary of everything you consume while you're here. You know, any food, drinks, toiletries you use from the pantry, anything. Just so we can keep track. We can total it all up at the end of the week. It'll make things easier for everyone." I stood there, poleaxed. My own daughter. She was going to charge me for room and board? And not just room and board, but for every slice of bread, every tea bag? The sheer unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. I felt a surge of white-hot anger, and it took every ounce of my self-control not to reach into my purse, pull out the lottery ticket, and slap her across the face with it. Instead, I just nodded meekly. "Of course, dear. That's very practical of you. I knew you'd understand," she said, patting my arm condescendingly. "Sleep well." I went into the guest room and closed the door, my hands shaking. I sat on the edge of the perfectly made bed and stared at that stupid notebook. It was a ledger of my worthlessness, an accounting of my burden. About an hour later, there was a tiny, hesitant knock on my door. I opened it to find Maya, my sweet granddaughter, standing there in her pajamas. "Grandma," she whispered, her eyes wide with worry, "is what Mom said true? Did you lose your apartment?" I nodded, my throat suddenly thick with real emotion. "Yes, I did, sweetie." She looked horrified. "That's awful. Mom and Dad have to let you stay here. This house is huge."
Her loyalty, so pure and immediate, was a balm on my wounded heart. "It's complicated, honey," I said. "Adult stuff." She chewed on her lower lip, thinking hard. Then she reached into the pocket of her pajama bottoms and pulled out a wadded-up $20 bill. "Here," she whispered, and pressed it into my hand, and closed my fingers around it. "All I have. I was saving it for my school trip to Washington, D.C., but you need it more." Tears sprang to my eyes, hot and real this time. Not the crocodile tears I'd shown her mother. This girl with her whole life ahead of her was offering me her last $20. Her mother, with a net worth in the millions, was preparing to bill me for toast. I tried to give it back. "Oh, Maya, no! You keep this for your trip." "No!" she insisted, her expression firm. "You're my grandma. We take care of each other." She gave me a fierce, quick hug and slipped out of the room before I could protest again. I closed the door and opened my hand. The crumpled bill sat in my palm, a beacon of simple human kindness in a house full of cold, transactional cruelty. I carefully unfolded it and placed it in the side pocket of my purse, right next to the lottery slip worth $90 million. They were two sides of the same coin, really. One represented the value of $1. The other represented the value of a heart. That night, before I went to sleep, I opened the notebook Brenda had given me. On the first line, in my neatest cursive, I wrote, "Entry number 1. 1 bottle of Fiji water. Value priceless, as it was given with such warmth and generosity." Then, I turned the page and started making my own list, a very different kind of list. It wasn't about what I was taking, but what I had given. $5,000 for a failed investment, decades of childcare when Brenda was building her career, the family heirloom ring I gave her when she got engaged, the thousands of hours of my life, my love, my support. Oh yes, we were going to count it all, and Brenda's bill was getting longer by the minute. The first night in Brenda's sterile guest room was surprisingly restful. Maybe it was the 1,000-thread sheets, or maybe it was the righteous, simmering anger that kept me warm. I woke up with a clear head and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Richard always used to say I was like a placid lake, but if you stirred the bottom, you'd find granite. Well, Brenda had taken a jackhammer to the bottom of my lake, and she was about to find out what granite felt like. I made my way downstairs, the little notebook clutched in my hand like a prayer book. The aroma of expensive artisan coffee wafted from the kitchen. Brenda was there, already dressed in another impossibly chic outfit, tapping away on a laptop at her giant marble island. She didn't look up when I came in. "Morning, Mom. The coffee in the silver pot is from Mark and me. I got you some instant from the pantry. It's on the second shelf behind the organic quinoa pasta. Use the mugs from the back of the cabinet, not the Royal Dalton ones." Insult to injury. She was policing my caffeine intake. "Of course, dear," I said, my voice dripping with the fake meekness I was perfecting. I found the jar of instant coffee. It looked like it had been there since the last Bush administration, and one of the thick, ugly mugs I guessed were reserved for workmen. I dutifully filled out my notebook. Entry number 2, 1 heaping teaspoon of questionable instant coffee. Entry number 3, approximately 8 ounces of heated tap water. As I sat down at the far end of the island, a clear social pariah, Brenda finally looked up from her screen. "So, I've been thinking," she announced, as if she were about to unveil a cure for the common cold. "While you're here, you can't just sit around. It's not good for your morale. My book club is coming over for a luncheon tomorrow, and frankly, Carol, our housekeeper, can never get the silverware polished to my standards. It would be a huge help if you could handle that for me today." So there it was. I wasn't a guest, or even a charity case. I was unpaid help. She wanted me to polish the silver she would use to serve wine and finger sandwiches to women who probably had their own mothers tucked away in expensive floral wallpapered assisted living facilities. The irony was exquisite. "I think I can manage that," I said, taking a sip of my dreadful coffee. "Where do you keep it?" "Carol will know. Just ask her when she gets in." She had already turned back to her laptop, dismissing me. A little while later, Carol, a kind-faced woman from Guatemala with weary eyes, arrived. When I explained that Brenda had asked me to polish the silver, a look of pity crossed her face. She clearly understood the dynamic at play. She wordlessly led me to a heavy chest in the dining room and supplied me with the polish and soft cloths. For the next 3 hours, I sat at the vast mahogany dining room table and polished. Spoons, forks, knives, strange little sporks for seafood I couldn't identify. With every repetitive motion, my plan grew clearer. This wasn't just about teaching Brenda a lesson. This was about restructuring my entire life, and by extension, hers. While I buffed the tarnish off her ostentatious silver, I was mentally buffing the tarnish off my own future. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. She thought I was just an old woman polishing forks. In reality, I was a general planning a war. Around noon, Mark came downstairs for lunch. He walked right past the dining room, but then did a double take, backing up into the doorway. He leaned against the frame, a smug look on his face, holding a sandwich on artisanal bread. "Well, look at this, putting the mater and mater familias," he said with a smirk. "Keeping busy, Ellen. That's the spirit. Can't let the devil find work for idle hands." The condescension was so thick, I could feel it sticking to my skin. I just gave him a thin smile. "It's the least I can do for Brenda's hospitality." "Right, hospitality. Listen, Brenda mentioned you're gonna start looking into some more permanent state-funded options. I've got a guy in my office who does some pro bono work in that area. Mostly slumlord stuff, but I'm sure he knows the ins and outs of the senior housing bureaucracy. I'll have him give you a call." It was a threat, veiled as an offer. He was reminding me of my place, letting me know that their generosity had a very, very short expiration date. State-funded. He may as well have just said, "the poorhouse." "That's very thoughtful of you, Mark," I replied, my voice steady. "I think I'd like to try and handle it myself first. I don't want to be a bother." "No bother," he said cheerfully, already losing interest. He disappeared back into his office, leaving the faint scent of smug satisfaction and deli mustard in his wake. Efficiency. That's what I was to them. A problem to be managed with maximum efficiency. Later that afternoon, after finishing the silver and making a detailed entry in the notebook, entry number 4, use of approximately 1/8 of a bottle of silver polish. Entry number 5, labor 3.5 hours. Valuation pending. I approached Brenda. "Honey," I said, putting on my best weary but hopeful face, "I think I'm going to go to the public library this afternoon. I can use their computers to look for a job. Maybe fill out some of those applications for senior housing Mark was talking about." Brenda lit up. This was progress. The problem was actively trying to solve itself. "Mom, that's a fantastic idea. So proactive of you. Do you need bus fare?" The offer sounded generous, but her eyes were already flicking toward her purse, calculating the cost of a $2 bus ticket. "That's all right, dear," I said, patting my own worn handbag. "I think I have enough for the bus." What I actually had was the $20 from Maya, a silent testament to the only real generosity in this house. The moment I stepped out of her oppressively perfect home, I felt like I could breathe again. The air itself seemed different. I walked the 3 blocks to my car, got in, and drove. Not to the public library, but to a Verizon store in the next town over. I used Maya's $20, supplemented by one of my own, to buy the most basic, untraceable, prepaid burner phone they had, an act of rebellion funded by an act of love. My next stop was a quiet, independent coffee shop. I sat in a cozy armchair in the corner and pulled out my real notebook, not Brenita's ledger of shame, but a new one I'd bought for myself. I ordered a real latte, a glorious, full-fat, overpriced latte, and I savored every single drop. This was my new office. My first call was to a man named Arthur Vance. He wasn't some stuffy, old-money estate lawyer. His name had been given to me by the Lottery Commission's advisory team as the shark you want on your side. He specialized in discreetly handling sudden, massive wealth. He answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and professional. "Vance? Mr. Vance, my name is Helen Peterson," I said, using my maiden name. I hadn't used it in nearly 50 years, and it felt wonderfully liberating. "The State Lottery Commission suggested I give you a call. I believe they forwarded you my details." There was a slight pause. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Peterson. I've been expecting your call. My congratulations." His tone was different now. It was the sound of respect. The sound of a man talking to $90 million. It was a sound I hadn't heard in a very long time. "I haven't claimed the check yet. I need some things put in place first. Ironclad things. I want to set up a blind trust and a charitable foundation. And I need a team, a forensic accountant, and the best family law attorney in the state. I have a complicated family situation I need to navigate." "I understand completely," he said. "Discretion and precision are the cornerstones of my practice. When would you like to meet?" We set up a meeting for the following afternoon in a discreet office building downtown. When I hung up, I felt a giddy sense of power. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was building. I was laying the foundations for my new life, brick by invisible brick. I spent another hour at the coffee shop, using their Wi-Fi on my old smartphone to research. I looked up Brenda and Mark's mortgage records. Public information, you know. I looked up the value of their house, their cars, the donations they'd made to various political campaigns. I was painting a picture of their life, and the more I saw, the more my resolve hardened. When I got back to the house, Brenda was in the kitchen directing Carol on the placement of canapes for the next day's luncheon. "There you are," she said, her voice sharp. "Did you have a productive afternoon?" "Oh yes," I said, arranging my face into a mask of tired defeat. It's all a little overwhelming, though. The paperwork is staggering." "Well, you just have to dive in," she said briskly, completely uninterested in the details. "No one's going to do it for you." "Oh, you have no idea how wrong you are, my dear," I thought. That night, after another joyless dinner, I was in my room when Maya knocked and slipped in. She was holding her sketchbook. "Grandma, can I show you something?" she asked, her voice small. She opened the book to a series of beautiful, intricate pencil drawings of birds. They were extraordinary, full of life and detail. "Maya, these are wonderful," I breathed, genuinely impressed. "You are so talented." A shadow crossed her face. "Mom says I should focus on things that will look good on a college application, like debate club. She says being an artist is a nice hobby, but it's not a career." I took her hand. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you that. Your talent is a gift. You follow that passion, you hear me?" She gave me a watery smile. "I wish you lived here all the time."
"Well, we'll have to see about that," I said, a hidden meaning in my words. After she left, I went back to my notebook. I was adding things to Brenda's bill, not just the $5,000, but things with no price tag. Under a new heading, Emotional and Psychological Damages, I wrote, "Discouraging the dreams of her own child. Incalculable." I fell asleep that night feeling like an undercover agent, a spy in the house of indifference. But just as I was drifting off,
I heard voices from the hallway. Brenda and Mark keeping their voices low, but not low enough. I spoke to Jeff in legal, Mark was saying. He said if we can get her declared mentally incompetent, we could get power of attorney. It would be a lot faster than waiting for the state to find her a bed. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about getting me out. They were actively discussing having me declared senile so they could control my life, my meager assets, and solve their problem efficiently. Brenda's reply was a soft murmur, but I could hear the agreement in it. Lying there in the dark, I clutched the prepaid phone on the nightstand, my secret weapon. The game had just changed. They thought they were a few steps away from putting me in a home. They had no idea I was a few phone calls away from buying it. Hearing my daughter and son-in-law discuss having me declared incompetent was like having a bucket of ice water thrown on my soul. All the hurt, all the little slights, they all coalesced into a hard, cold diamond of fury in my chest. This was no longer just a test. This was a rescue mission, and the person I needed to rescue was me, from them. The next morning, the day of Brenda's book club luncheon, I was the perfect picture of a doddering old woman. I moved a little slower, I asked her to repeat things twice, and I accidentally dropped a spoon on the floor, making a clatter that grated on her perfectly composed nerves. Every little action was a deliberate piece of performance art. I wanted them to get comfortable in their assessment of me. Cockiness creates blind spots. Brenda, in her element as the grand hostess, was a whirlwind of frantic energy. She handed me a dust cloth. "Mom, can you at least make yourself useful and dust the baseboards in the dining room? Carol is swamped with the food prep, and I want everything to be perfect." "Of course, dear," I murmured, my head bowed. As I got on my hands and knees, my 68-year-old knees protesting loudly, to wipe down the custom-milled baseboards, I could feel her watching me, her eyes filled with a mixture of irritation and pity. Good. Let her think I was pathetic. While my hands were dusting her gleaming floors, my mind was miles away, in a sleek downtown office, rehearsing the lines I would deliver to my new lawyer. I finished my menial task and dutifully wrote it down in the shame ledger. Entry number 6, labor, dusting of 144 linear feet of baseboards on hands and knees, valuation pending. I then shuffled off to my room, telling Brenda I needed to rest my back. The moment the door was closed, I pulled out my burner phone and sent a text to Arthur Vance. "The meeting is more urgent than I thought. Is there any way you can see me at 11 a.m. instead of this afternoon? The situation has escalated." His reply came back in less than a minute. "11 a.m. is perfect. The conference room is ready. Be safe." Be safe. The words were a simple professional courtesy, but they resonated deep within me. He saw me as a client to be protected, not a burden to be managed. At 10:30, as the first of Brenda's perfectly coiffed book club friends were arriving, their luxury SUVs gliding up the driveway, I put my plan into action. I crept downstairs, my old purse in hand. Brenda was at the door, greeting a woman dripping in David Yurman jewelry with air kisses. I caught her eye and gestured with my head, a look of contrived panic on my face. She excused herself, an annoyed frown creasing her Botoxed forehead. "What is it, Mom? Can't you see I'm busy?" she hissed, pulling me into the laundry room. "Brenda, honey, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I have that appointment at the social services office for the housing assistance. I must have gotten the time wrong. They just called and said I have to be there by 11:30 or I lose my spot."
This was, of course, a complete lie. It was a perfect lie, because it was exactly what she wanted to hear. She wanted me to be actively seeking to remove myself from her life. Her irritation instantly melted away, replaced by brisk efficiency. "Well, why didn't you say so? You can't miss that. Here." She fumbled in her purse, a Chanel monstrosity that probably cost more than Richard's first car, and pulled out a $50 bill. "Take an Uber. It'll be faster than the bus. And for heaven's sake, don't tell the driver you're going to social services. Just give him the address." The thought that an Uber driver might judge her by her mother's destination was apparently a major concern. "Oh, thank you, honey," I gushed. "I'll pay you back. I'll put it in the vote book. Just go," she said, shooing me towards the garage. "Call me when you're done." He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. That's a little preview of what's coming for Mark, but for now, Brenda was making it all too easy. I didn't call an Uber. I walked the 3 blocks to my hidden car and drove myself downtown, the $50 bill from Brenda tucked into my console. I would add it to her bill, or maybe frame it. The offices of Vance & Associates were on the top floor of a gleaming glass skyscraper. Everything was muted tones, expensive art, and quiet, confident professionalism. A world away from Brenda's loud, look-at-me brand of wealth. I was greeted by a poised young woman who called me Mrs. Peterson and offered me sparkling water with a slice of lime. Arthur Vance was a man in his late 50s with intelligent eyes and an impeccably tailored suit. He stood up when I entered the conference room and shook my hand firmly. There was no condescension in his gaze. He simply saw a woman with a problem he was being paid handsomely to solve. He introduced 2 other people in the room, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s named Sarah Jennings, who was the forensic accountant, and a calm, reassuring man named Ben Carter, the family law attorney. I sat at the head of a long, polished table. It felt good. I took a deep breath. "I thank you for meeting me on such short notice," I began, my voice clear and steady. The meek, shuffling woman from Brenda's house was gone. In her place was Helen Peterson, CEO of her own damn life. "My son-in-law, Mark Turner, is an attorney. Last night, I overheard him and my daughter discussing the possibility of having me declared mentally incompetent in order to gain power of attorney." Ben Carter, the family lawyer, sat up straighter. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" "Only my word." But his exact words were that it would be a lot faster than waiting for the state to find her a bed. "They believe I am destitute and a burden they need to manage efficiently. They have no idea about my current financial situation. I want to keep it that way for now. I want you to work in the shadows. For all intent and purposes, I am a poor, helpless old woman. Officially, everything must be handled through the blind trust and a series of LLCs we are about to create." For the next 2 hours, we worked. Arthur explained the intricacies of the trust, ensuring my name would not be attached to any future purchases or transactions. He named it the Blackbird Trust, a nod to the Beatles song I'd mentioned was my favorite. Sarah Jennings, the accountant, showed me how she could trace financial histories, find hidden assets, and paint a picture of a person's life with numbers. She listened intently as I told her about the $5,000 investment Brenda had never paid back. A slow smile spread across her face. "Oh, I love finding those. It's like a treasure hunt." But it was Ben Carter who became the architect of my immediate plan. He was a master strategist. "Ellen, they've given us a gift," he explained, his calm voice cutting through my anger. "By discussing incompetency, they have shown their hand. Any move they make now, any attempt to control you or your non-existent assets, can be framed as elder abuse and predatory behavior. The fact that you are of sound mind and considerable means will make their actions look utterly monstrous in front of a judge, should it ever come to that. I don't want it to come to that. I want to hit them where they live, their reputation, their social standing, their money."
Then nodded. "Then we begin quietly. Phase 1 is information gathering. Phase 2 is positioning your assets. Phase 3, he paused, a glint in his eye, is the checkmate." We started with Phase 1. While I sat in that office sipping my fancy water, Sarah Jennings did a preliminary deep dive into Brenda and Mark's finances. What she found was interesting.
They lived a life financed by debt, a second mortgage on the house, 2 luxury cars leased, not owned, credit card balances that would make a sailor blush. They were putting on a show, living right up to the edge of their income and probably beyond. They're house poor and image rich, Sarah summarized. A very fragile combination. One good push and the whole house of cards comes down. Next on the list was my old landlord, Mr. Peterson. I gave Ben the details of my eviction. "He's a classic slumlord," Ben said, after a quick search on his tablet. Dozens of complaints filed with the city, a few lawsuits that were settled out of court. He preys on people who can't fight back. "I want to fight back," I said. "For myself and for everyone else he's done this to. I want that duplex. In fact, I want the whole building." Arthur Vance made a note. "An LLC under the Blackbird Trust will purchase the building. Peterson will never know who the buyer is until it's too late. We can likely use his documented history of code violations as leverage to depress the sale price." My last piece of business for the day was my granddaughter, Maya. I want to set up a separate trust for her education, her future, anything she ever wants or needs. But my daughter and her husband cannot be the trustees. They cannot touch a single penny of it. We can assign a bank or a private professional as the trustee. It's a standard provision. When I left that office just after 1 p.m., the world looked different. The city buzzed with possibility. I was no longer a victim of circumstance. I was a force of nature in a sensible cardigan. Brenda's book club luncheon would be in full swing. I could only imagine the conversation. Brenda sighing dramatically to her friends, telling them about her terrible burden, her poor dear mother who had shown up on her doorstep. They would all murmur sympathetically, clucking their tongues over their crustless sandwiches, before moving on to dissecting someone's bad facelift. They were playing checkers. I was playing 3-dimensional chess. I stopped at a small bistro for lunch and treated myself to a steak fritz and a glass of Chardonnay. I opened Brenda's notebook. Underneath the entry about the baseboards, I wrote, "Entry number 7. 1 Uber ride falsified, care of Brenda Turner, $50. Entry number 8. Retainer fee for legal, financial, and family law counsel. Redacted, but a hell of a lot more than $50. I smiled to myself as I took a sip of my wine. I got back to the house at 3 o'clock, just as the last of the book club ladies were leaving. I made sure to walk up the driveway looking tired and footsore from my imaginary bus ride and long day at the social services office. Brenda met me at the door. "Well, how did it go? Did you get on a list?" I said, "It was a long day. A lot of forms. They said the waiting list for subsidized housing is almost 2 years long." I watched the light go out of her eyes. 2 years? The prospect of having me around for 2 more weeks was already straining her composure. 2 years was an eternity. This was a crucial part of the plan. I had to become an anchor, dragging down her carefully curated life. 2 years? She repeated, her voice a horrified whisper. "That's what the woman said," I sighed, shuffling past her toward the stairs. "I'm just so tired. I think I need to go lie down." I didn't go to lie down. I went to my room, sat in a comfortable chair by the window, and watched as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across my daughter's perfect manicured lawn. The war had begun. The first pieces were in motion, and the enemy had absolutely no idea they were even on a battlefield. The lie about the 2-year waiting list for housing settled over Brenda's house like a fine layer of dust, coating every surface with a film of grim reality. My continued presence was no longer a temporary inconvenience. It was a long-term siege. Brenda's outright patience snapped. She started communicating mostly through heavy, theatrical sighs. If I was in a room, she would sigh when she entered it. If I opened the refrigerator, a gust of martyred air would follow me from the living room. The petty accounting escalated. The shame ledger, which had started as a cruel joke, became her new holy scripture. One morning, she stood with her hands on her hips, staring at the coffee maker. "Mom, this machine makes 10 cups. I made a pot this morning, and now there are only 8 cups left. Did you have 2 cups?" "I only had 1, dear," I said truthfully. "A very large one, then," she muttered, before marching over and putting a piece of masking tape on the water reservoir with a line drawn in permanent marker. "Please, just fill it to this line for a single cup. Wasting coffee is like pouring money down the drain." I dutifully made my entry in the notebook. Entry number 9. 1 12-ounce cup of coffee, brewed under intense scrutiny. Note, henceforth to be rationed. Mark was worse. He took to unplugging things. If I was watching the small television in the guest room, he'd walk by the open door and say, "Trying to be more energy conscious, Helen?" before reaching in and pulling the plug from the wall. They turned the thermostat down to a brisk 65 degrees, forcing me to wear my sweater indoors at all times while Brenda and her daughters walked around in cozy cashmere. It was all so transparently designed to make me miserable, to make me leave. They were trying to smoke me out, like a raccoon in the chimney. Little did they know, I was quite comfortable. Their miserly cruelty was fuel for my fire. Each petty act was another exhibit in the case I was building against them in my mind, another line item on the final invoice I was preparing. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen, carefully measuring my single serving of tap water for my instant coffee, when Maya came home from school. She looked dejected, slumping into a chair at the island and dropping her heavy backpack to the floor with a thud. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked, sitting down next to her. "My art final. The project is due in 2 weeks and it's half our grade. We're supposed to do a multi-medium canvas. I need acrylic paints, some texture paste, and a decent set of brushes. Mom said art supplies are a frivolous expense and I should just use my old watercolor set from middle school." Right on cue, Brenda swept in, dropping a bag from an expensive boutique on the counter. "Maya, I told you we are on a budget. And get that enormous bag off my clean floor." "It's a $20,000 kitchen, Brenda," Maya shot back, her voice dripping with teenage sarcasm. "I think the floor can handle it." "Don't you take that tone with me," Brenda snapped. "I need the supplies, Mom. Everyone else's parents are taking them to the art store. It's for a grade." "Then get a job and buy them yourself," Brenda said coolly, turning her back to unload a single, ludicrously expensive-looking cheese from her shopping bag. Maya's face crumpled. She grabbed her backpack and stormed upstairs, a sob catching in her throat. My heart ached for her. My daughter, who could drop $100 on a wedge of cheese without blinking, was refusing to spend $50 on her own child's education and passion. Later, I went up to check on Maya. I got the name of her art teacher and the exact list of supplies she needed. The next morning, when Brenda thought I was on a bus to the library to job hunt, I was in my car, on my burner phone, with a very helpful assistant from the Blackbird Trust concierge service. "Yes," I said, "I need a deluxe acrylic paint set, the professional grade, a full range of brushes, 3 gallery-wrapped canvases, size 18 by 24, and a variety of modeling pastes and gels. Please have it delivered to Northwood High School, addressed to Miss Albright's classroom, and the gift note should read, 'Every artist needs the right tools. From a secret admirer.'" The feeling of making that call was better than any spa day Brenda could ever buy. It was quiet, effective, invisible power. I was a phantom benefactor, a fairy godmother in a sensible Buick. I imagined Maya's face when the box arrived, the look of confusion, then dawning joy. I knew she'd suspect it was me, but she would never be sure, and she would never tell. It was a secret we would share without ever speaking it. I know this part is hard to hear, because it's about a mother's cruelty, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. She was so busy guarding her fancy cheese, she didn't realize her greatest treasure, her daughter's heart, was being won over by the woman she was trying to push out. A few days later, I was polishing the silver again. It seemed to have become my official duty, when my burner phone, tucked into my apron pocket, vibrated. I slipped into the laundry room to answer it. It was Ben Carter.
"Good news, Helen," he said, his voice calm and businesslike. "Phase 1 of the Peterson acquisition is complete." I held my breath. And? "And Mr. Peterson has accepted our offer." "He did? Just like that?" I asked, surprised. I expected a fight from a man like that. Ben chuckled. "Not exactly just like that. Our initial offer was made through an LLC called Northwood Property Ventures. He sent back a ridiculously high counteroffer and told our representative to, and I quote, get lost. So, as planned, we moved to the leverage phase. We sent him a second package. It contained our original offer again, along with a binder. The binder contained a fully documented list of every single housing code violation in that building, compiled by the best private investigator in the city. It included sworn affidavits from 3 former tenants about his refusal to make repairs. It also included a draft of a lawsuit to be filed on behalf of all his past and present tenants for negligence, and a demand for punitive damages that would tie him up in court for the next decade. I could picture the sour-faced Mr. Peterson, his little empire of misery, reading through that binder. "And?" I prompted, a grin spreading across my face. He called our representative 30 minutes later, screaming and sputtering. He called us vultures and bottom feeders. But by the end of the call, he accepted our original offer. The building is yours, or rather, it belongs to the Blackbird Trust. The closing will be in 30 days. He has no idea who the buyer is, other than a faceless corporation. "Thank you, Ben," I said, my voice thick with emotion. The leaky faucet, the eviction notice, it had all come full circle. That building, a place of anxiety and decay, was now mine, my first act of justice. "My pleasure, Helen," he said. "The first eviction notice he gets will be our own, ordering him to finally bring the building up to code at his own expense before the sale closes, per the fine print, of course." I hung up feeling 10 feet tall. I looked at the fork in my hand, Brenda's heavy, ornate silver. I was polishing her trinkets while I was out buying city blocks. The sheer, delicious absurdity of it all made me laugh out loud. That evening, the atmosphere in the house was even more toxic than usual. Brenda and Mark were having a hushed, furious argument in his office. My presence was a weight they could no longer bear. Their plan to have me declared incompetent had to be accelerated. After dinner, Mark approached me. Brenda hovered in the background, a vulture waiting to pick the bones. "Helen," he started, his voice dripping with false concern, the kind a doctor uses before giving you terrible news. "Can we talk for a minute, just you and me?" He led me to the cold, sterile living room and sat me down on the pristine white couch. "Brenda and I are worried about you," he said, leaning forward and clasping his hands. "This whole eviction situation has obviously been a tremendous shock to your system. We're concerned you're not thinking clearly." I looked at him, my face a perfect mask of bewildered innocence. "What do you mean, Mark? I'm just tired, that's all." "It's more than that, Helen," he said, his eyes scanning my face for weakness. "The other day, I asked you if you'd paid your car insurance, and you couldn't remember the name of your provider, and you misplaced your glasses twice yesterday." These were events he had manufactured. He'd hidden my glasses. He'd asked me a question while Brenda was simultaneously asking me another. They were building a case. "I'm just stressed, Mark," I said, letting my lower lip tremble. "It's a lot to handle at my age." "Of course it is," he soothed, "and that's why we want to help. I've had some papers drawn up. Just simple stuff. It gives me the ability to talk to the bank on your behalf, to handle things like Social Security and Medicare for you, so you don't have to worry about all that confusing paperwork. It's just a way for us to take some of the burden off your shoulders." He pulled a sheaf of papers from a leather-bound folder and placed them on the coffee table. A durable power of attorney, the first step to a full conservatorship, the legal machinery to erase me. I stared at the papers as if I couldn't comprehend them. Inside, my mind was a steel trap.
I had him. He had just handed me the loaded gun, his fingerprints all over it. "Oh," I said, my voice small and breathy. That's a lot of big words, Mark. I don't know." I reached for the papers, letting my hand shake. Can I just take these to my room to read them over? It's all a bit much for me right now."
A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He'd wanted me to sign them right then and there, but forcing a confused old woman would look bad, even to him. "Of course, Helen," he said, his smile tight. "Take all the time you need. We're just trying to protect you." I gathered the papers, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with exhilaration. I stood up on trembling legs and shuffled out of the room. "Thank you, Mark. You and Brenda are just so good to me." The moment my bedroom door was shut, the frail old woman vanished. I laid the papers on the desk, a triumphant grin spreading across my face. I pulled out the burner phone and took crystal-clear pictures of every single page. I composed an email to Ben Carter. Subject: Exhibit A. Body: "Look what the tat dragged in." He put it right in my hands. "Let me know what you make of this. Talk tomorrow." I hit send. Then I picked up Brenda's shame ledger. It was time for a new entry. Entry number 10. One unsolicited, predatory legal document, disguised as an act of kindness. Valuation: everything they have. They thought they were closing the net. They had no idea they were tightening the noose around their own necks. That power of attorney document sat on my nightstand like a coiled snake. It was both a terrifying symbol of my children's avarice and the single greatest piece of evidence I could have hoped for. The next morning, I had a short, encrypted call with Ben Carter. His voice was grimly satisfied. "It's beautifully brazen, Helen. The language is incredibly broad. It would give him control not just of your finances, but your healthcare decisions. It's the kind of document you'd use if you were preparing to move someone into a long-term care facility against their will. Combined with his conversation about having you declared incompetent, this is a slam-dunk case for attempted elder financial abuse." "So, what's my next move?" I asked. He said, "Let him press you. The more he pushes, the more rope we give him to hang him with. Feign confusion. Say you showed it to a friend from your old church group who said it looked complicated. Tell him you're scared of signing something you don't understand. Drag it out. In the meantime, we're moving on your other acquisitions." Following his advice, I treated the legal documents like a hot potato. Whenever Mark brought them up, I'd get a flustered, anxious look on my face. "Oh, Mark, all that legal talk just flies right over my head. My friend Martha, you remember from the bridge club? Her son is a paralegal. Maybe I should just ask him to take a peek at it for me." Nothing could have panicked him more than the thought of another legal professional, even a lowly paralegal, seeing that document. "No," he'd say, a little too quickly. "That's not necessary, Helen. It's standard, a formality. We don't want to bother Martha's son with our family business." His desperation was beginning to show, and it was a delightful thing to watch. Meanwhile, my new life was taking shape in the background, a silent, parallel construction. I used my clandestine trips to the library to orchestrate a flurry of activity through my team. The Blackbird Trust, acting through one of its anonymous LLCs, purchased a beautiful 3-story brownstone in a historic part of the city. It had been a bed and breakfast that was going out of business. It needed work, but it was magnificent, with a small garden in the back and gorgeous bay windows. Arthur Vance arranged for a top architectural firm to begin drawing up plans for a full renovation, my new home. Next, I turned my attention to David, my son in Oregon. David was a high school history teacher, a good, kind man married to a wonderful woman, Sarah, a nurse.
They worked hard but were always just scraping by. They had 2 great kids and a mountain of student loan debt. I called him one afternoon from the privacy of my car. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice warm and concerned. "How are you holding up? Brenda called me. She said you were having a difficult time adjusting." The air quotes were almost audible. "David, honey, I need to tell you something," I began. And for the first time, I told someone in my family the partial truth. I told him I sold a piece of jewelry Richard had left me, a family heirloom, and that it had turned out to be surprisingly valuable. I told him it was enough for me to get a new place and be comfortable. It was a watered-down version of the truth, a necessary fiction to keep the full scope of my wealth a secret for now.
He was overjoyed. "Mom, that's fantastic. I've been so worried. I told Brenda you should come out here and stay with us." "I know you did, honey, and I love you for it. But listen, the real reason I'm calling is for you. I want to help you and Sarah. I've set something up for you. An educational fund. It's going to pay off your and Sarah's student loans completely. And it's going to cover a full college education for both of my grandsons, wherever they want to go." There was stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard him choke up. "Mom, what? Are you serious? That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's life-changing." "I'm very serious," I said, tears in my own eyes. "I'm having the lawyer who handled the sale for me send you the papers. It's all taken care of. No strings attached. You and Sarah deserve it. You're good people." We both cried on the phone for a few minutes. It was a conversation of pure, unadulterated joy. It was what money was supposed to be for. To lift burdens, to create freedom, to show love. It was the absolute antithesis of Brenda's ledger and Mark's predatory legal forms. Don't go anywhere, because the moment you've been waiting for is getting close. Brenda was about to take the bait, hook, line, and sinker. The breaking point at Brenda's house arrived as I knew it would. My passive resistance over the power of attorney was driving Mark insane. My very presence was like a grain of sand in the oyster of their perfect life, except instead of creating a pearl, I was creating a festering infection of resentment. It happened on a Tuesday. I had, as instructed, logged every single item I'd eaten that week. 1 apple. 1 slice of dry toast, 3 tea bags. It was a pathetic list. Brenda stood at the kitchen island with a calculator and my notebook. She tapped in the numbers with her long, lacquered nails. "Okay, Mom," she said, her voice businesslike and severe. "We need to settle up for the last 2 weeks. Based on my estimates of fair market value for the food items plus a nominal daily charge for utilities and lodging, your total comes to $487.52. She turned the calculator around for me to see the number as if I were a child who couldn't comprehend it. It was so ludicrous, so utterly without grace or familial love that I almost laughed. $487 for crumbs from her table and a bed in her house? "Brenda, dear," I said, my voice soft and quavering. I don't have that right now. Social Security doesn't come until the 3rd. "I know when Social Security comes. This isn't a surprise. I told you we'd need to keep track of this." This was my moment, the one Ben and I had planned. It was time to spring the trap. "I know, honey, and I'm so grateful," I whimpered. "It's just, maybe I should just go. I don't want to be a burden anymore. I heard there's a shelter on the other side of town, the one for women. Maybe they'd have a bed." I watched her face. Her first reaction was a flicker of hope. The problem was volunteering to solve itself. But that was immediately followed by a cold panic. Her mother in a homeless shelter. What would the neighbors say? What would her book club friends think if they found out? Her perfectly crafted image would shatter. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, though the words lacked conviction.
You're not going to a shelter." "But I can't pay you, Brenda," I cried, turning up the waterworks. "It's this or I'm on the street. Mark has been so insistent about me signing those papers. Maybe if I just sign them, he can figure all this out for me?" I gestured vaguely, as if the connection between signing the papers and solving my financial woes was something a confused old lady would naturally make. I had dangled the ultimate bait. She took it. "Yes," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Yes, that's a wonderful idea, Mom. That's why Mark had them drawn up in the first place, to help you. I'll go get them right now. And a pen." She scurried out of the room like a ferret after a rabbit. She returned with the documents and Mark, who had apparently been waiting in the wings for his cue. "Helen, you're making a very wise decision. This will let me get everything sorted out for you." He clicked a pen and spread the signature page on the island right next to the calculator with its insulting total.
This was it, the climax. I picked up the pen, my hand shaking with manufactured fear, but my heart was as steady as a rock. I was about to sign my name, but not on his document. I put the pen down. I looked from the papers to Brenda's eager face to Mark's predatory smile. Then I reached into my purse. I didn't pull out a wallet. I pulled out a long, crisp, business-sized envelope. I slid it across the marble countertop toward them. It landed with a soft, definitive little slap. "What's this?" Brenda asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "My payment," I said. My voice was different now. The quaver was gone. It was clear and cold and full of a power she had never heard before. They looked at each other, confused. Mark picked up the envelope and tore it open. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. He read it, his smug expression slowly dissolving, replaced by a mask of slack-jawed disbelief. "What is it, Mark?" Brenda demanded, peering over his shoulder. He couldn't speak. He just handed her the paper. She read it, her lips moving silently. Then she looked up at me, her face pale. "I don't understand. This is an invoice." "It is," I confirmed. "I believe in keeping track of things. It's a habit you taught me." "This invoice," Mark stammered, finding his voice, "is for $5,127,000. This is a joke." "I assure you it is not a joke. Let's review it together, shall we? You can check my math." I pulled a second copy from my purse. First line item, one unpaid personal loan made 5 years ago, amount $5,000, with accrued interest at a modest market rate that comes to $7,150. Second item, approximately 2,000 hours of unpaid childcare provided over a 10-year period while you were building your career, billed at a conservative $50 an hour. That comes to $100,000. Then we have the heirloom diamond ring I gave you, which you told me you lost, but which I know you had appraised and sold 2 years ago to pay for your kitchen renovation. That's another $20,000. I let that sink in. Brenda looked like she'd been struck by lightning. "But that's not the bulk of it, is it?" I continued, my voice merciless. "The remaining $5 million is listed under emotional and psychological damages. That's for years of neglect, for being made to feel like a burden, for trying to have your own mother declared legally incompetent for financial gain. Oh, and by the way, I have a recording of that little conversation. It seems the new hearing aid the doctor gave me has a Bluetooth recording feature. Amazing technology, isn't it? It was a bluff, but a magnificent one." They turned sheet white. Mark finally snapped out of his stupor. "You're insane! You're a broke old woman playing games! You can't invoice us for $5 million! You don't have 5 cents to your name!" "Oh, Mark," I said, a slow, pitying smile spreading across my face. "That's where you are so very, very wrong.
From my purse, I pulled out another document, a notarized statement of net worth, prepared by the accounting firm of Jennings and Associates, detailing the assets of the Blackbird Trust, of which I was the sole beneficiary. I let them see the final number at the bottom, with all its beautiful, glorious zeros. I audited you for a cup of coffee. I audited your entire life. You thought I was a liability. It turns out I'm the bank. I stood up from the stool, suddenly feeling like the queen in my own throne room.
You have 30 days to vacate this house, I announced. The bank that holds your second mortgage was delighted to sell the debt to one of my holding companies this morning. As of 10 a.m., I am your lender. And seeing as you are flagrantly in default, I am foreclosing. I am also dissolving Maya's college fund, the one you control, and placing those assets in a new trust that you will never be able to touch. Brenda finally broke. A raw, guttural sob escaped her lips. Mom, no! Why? Why? I repeated, my voice finally breaking with the pent-up pain of years. Because my own daughter saw me as a line item in her budget. Because my granddaughter offered me her last $20 while you were drawing up a bill for toast. You didn't just fail a test, Brenda. You failed at being a human being. I turned and walked towards the door, leaving them standing there amidst the wreckage of their lives, holding an invoice they could never pay and a power of attorney that was now just a piece of trash. I stopped at the doorway and turned back one last time. Oh, and Brenda, your book club is lovely. I ran into Susan at the market the other day. I bought her little investment fund. Apparently it was for sale. So I suppose that makes me her boss. And yours. I'll see you at the next meeting. We should discuss downsizing. With that, I walked out the front door into the sunshine, leaving the dark, cold house behind me forever. I got into my old Toyota, started the engine, and for the first time in a very long time, I had no idea where I was going, and it felt like freedom. I hope you've all enjoyed this story. It's been a hard one to tell, but getting it out has been part of the healing. Life can throw you some incredible curveballs, but sometimes those curves lead you to a place you were always meant to be. Thank you for listening. Now I have a question for all of you watching. What would you do in my place? What is the first thing you would have done with that money? Let me know in the comments below. I can't wait to read your answers.
Your watch to the end. Be click here. You will hear another story from my grandma.